Snow whipped against the small log cabin tucked deep in the Montana mountains. The wind howled through the pines, shaking the wooden walls as if the storm itself wanted to break inside. Jake Morrison stood in the doorway, his rough hand gripping the frame. He had lived alone up here for 3 long years. No visitors, no neighbors, no Christmas lights or carols. Just silence and the cold. But tonight, something impossible was happening. A woman stood on his doorstep, her thin coat soaked with melting snow. Her dark hair clung to her face and her lips were turning blue from the icy wind. She looked exhausted, frightened, and ready to collapse. "Please, I won't be any trouble," she said, her voice shaking. "I just need somewhere warm for the night." Her swollen belly showed she was heavy with child. At least 7 or 8 months. The sight made Jake's heart tighten. A pregnant woman alone, in a blizzard, on Christmas Eve. It didn't make sense. Women in her condition didn't wander into the wild mountains by accident. Something was wrong. Behind Jake, the warm glow of the fire lit the small one-room cabin. It smelled of burning pine wood and fresh coffee. For 3 years, Jake had chosen to live far from town and far from people. He thought solitude would numb the pain he carried, but as he looked at the shivering stranger, he felt that something inside him shift. "Come in," he said at last. The woman stepped inside with slow, careful movements, one hand resting protectively over her belly. Jake closed the door quickly, shutting out the storm. She stood near the fire, rubbing her hands together as the heat slowly returned to her body. "I'm Sarah," she whispered. "I'm sorry for showing up like this. I had nowhere else to go." Jake poured her a cup of hot coffee from the pot that always sat on his wood stove. When he handed it to her, their fingers touched lightly. Her hands were cold, thin, and delicate. She looked like she had been through a long and painful journey. "How did you find this place?" he asked, taking a seat across from her. His cabin was 5 miles from the nearest trail. Even skilled hikers avoided these mountains in winter, and the storm outside was the worst he had seen in years. Sarah wrapped her fingers tightly around the mug, holding it close for warmth. "I walked for 2 days," she said. "I saw smoke from the ridge and followed it. Someone in town mentioned a man living up here, a man who lost his family." Jake's expression hardened. He had come here to escape that story. He didn't want to hear it, and he didn't want others speaking about it. He stared into the fire, the flames reflecting in his tired eyes. "I don't know what you heard," he said quietly. Sarah looked at him, her brown eyes soft but steady. "I heard you were a doctor once, that you had a wife and a little girl, that they died 3 years ago, right before Christmas, and after that, you disappeared." The words struck him like a punch. His jaw tightened. He stood and walked to the small window, staring out at the snow falling heavy against the glass. Memories he fought to bury clawed their way up again. The accident, the phone call, the hospital, the unbearable grief. He wanted to be alone. That was the deal he made with himself when he moved up here. No more people, no more responsibility, no more pain. But Sarah's presence stirred something he had been trying to kill inside himself for 3 years. The part of him that cared. "Why are you here?" he asked without turning around. "Women like you don't climb mountains in a blizzard, especially not alone." For a long moment Sarah said nothing. Only the fire crackled in the silence. Then he heard the soft sound of her breath as she spoke. "Because I'm running out of time," she said. "And I thought you might understand what it feels like to lose everything." Jake turned slowly toward her. She looked so small in his big leather chair, holding her belly as if she feared it might break. The firelight revealed lines of exhaustion on her face and a deep sadness in her eyes. "What are you running from?" he asked. She hesitated, then lifted her eyes to his. "My ex-husband," she said. "He doesn't want this baby to exist." Jake's chest tightened. Her voice was calm, but the pain underneath was clear. He could see the truth in her trembling hands, and the way she sat with her back straight, as if life had made her learn to stay quiet, stay small, and stay ready to flee. "How far along are you?" Jake asked, his old medical instincts rising. He had not used them in years, but they had never truly left him. 34 weeks, she said. "The baby's due in January, but—" Her voice faded, and she looked down at her hands. "I've been having contractions. They come and go. The doctor in town told me to rest, but I couldn't stay. He would have found me." Outside, the storm raged louder, as if sealing them in for the night. The wind shook the cabin walls, snow piling against the door. They were trapped, together. Jake watched her for a moment. Then something inside him, a spark of who he used to be, finally returned. "You need proper care," he said, "and until this storm passes, you're staying here. I'll help you through the night." For the first time since she arrived, Sarah's shoulders relaxed. Her eyes filled with relief, and she nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. Jake Morrison didn't know it yet, but opening his door to a lonely pregnant woman on Christmas Eve would lead to a truth that would break his heart open in a way he never expected. Jake gathered blankets and helped Sarah settle on the small bed near the fire. The wind outside howled like a warning, but inside the cabin, the crackling fire gave a small sense of safety. Even so, Jake could not ignore the worry growing inside him. 34 weeks was early. If the baby came too soon, they would be alone with no hospital, no backup, and no room for mistakes. Sarah winced as another contraction tightened through her body. It passed after a few seconds, but Jake noticed the pain in her eyes. He sat beside her, gently checking her pulse like the doctor he once was. "You're tense," he said softly. "Try to breathe slowly." Sarah nodded. "I'm trying. It's just everything I went through to get here, and now I feel like the baby might come too early." Jake placed a hand on the bed to steady himself. He hadn't taken care of a patient in 3 years. The last time he had stood at a hospital bed, he had been watching over his wife and daughter. He had failed them. That memory still stabbed at his heart. He tried to push the thought aside and focused on Sarah. "How long have the contractions been coming?" "Since yesterday morning," she said. They were 20 minutes apart, now closer to 10. Jake frowned. That meant labor was progressing faster than he hoped. A normal hospital could handle it. But this cabin, in the middle of a mountain storm, was a risky place for a baby to be born. "Sarah," he said carefully, "I need you to tell me the truth. Did your ex-husband hurt you?" Sarah stared at the fire for a long moment before answering. "Not physically this time, at least, not where others could see. He knows how to hide the damage. But he made it clear that if I kept this baby, he would take her from me. I knew I had to run." A tear slipped down her cheek. She brushed it away quickly, as if tears were a luxury she could not afford. Jake felt anger rise inside him. He had seen women like Sarah before in the emergency room. Frightened, alone, hurt by the person who promised to love them. Back then, he had done his best to help them. After losing his family, he had closed that part of himself away. Now this woman had landed on his doorstep, almost like fate was forcing him to face the part of himself he'd abandoned. Another contraction came, stronger this time. Sarah gripped the edge of the blanket, her breath shaking. Jake helped her through it, timing it silently. When it passed, Sarah looked at him with tired eyes. "You really were a doctor," she whispered. "I can tell." He nodded. "I was. I left that life behind." Sarah studied him as if she could see the hidden story inside him. "Because you lost them?" Quote. Jake swallowed hard. His voice was low when he finally spoke. "My wife, Emma, and my daughter, Anna. 3 years ago, just before Christmas, there was an accident. I was working late that night. If I had left work earlier, I might have been with them. Maybe I could have stopped it, or at least been there to hold them longer. I wasn't, and I never forgave myself." The fire dimmed a little, as if the room itself felt his pain. Sarah reached for his hand, her touch gentle. "You didn't fail them. You were helping others like you always did. You saved lives." Jake shook his head. "I saved strangers, but not my own family." "And would Emma blame you for that?" Sarah asked softly. "Or would she thank you for helping families who still had a chance to stay together?" Jake didn't answer. He didn't know how. A sudden sharp pain made Sarah gasp and curl forward. Jake moved fast, placing his hand on her back. "Sarah, Talk to me. How bad was that one? That was stronger, she whispered, her voice shaking. It feels like things are changing. Jake's instincts returned fully. The doctor inside him took control. He gently examined her, then stepped away with a serious expression. You're in early labor, he said. We need to keep you calm, warm, and resting. If we're lucky, we can slow it down until the storm stops. And if we're not? She asked. Jake looked into her eyes. Then we deliver your baby right here. Fear filled her expression, but she nodded. You won't leave me, will you? Jake shook his head. No, I'm here. Whatever happens, you're not alone. Time passed slowly as the storm continued outside. Jake checked Sarah often, kept her warm, and guided her through each contraction. The fire burned bright, filling the cabin with light and warmth. A small Christmas wreath hung on the wall that he had never bothered to take down from his first winter here. He used to think it didn't matter anymore. Now, with Sarah here, with a baby fighting to enter the world, he wondered if maybe Christmas still had meaning, just not the kind he expected. Sarah's eyes began to close between contractions. She was exhausted. Jake sat near her, watching over her like a silent guard. The storm outside had trapped them together, but inside the cabin something else was happening. Something fragile, something healing. Jake looked at her sleeping face and whispered, almost to himself, maybe we both came to the right place. Quote, he didn't know that the long night ahead would test him in ways he hadn't faced since the day he lost everything. And by the time the truth came out, nothing in his life would ever be the same. Wait, before we move on, what do you think about the story so far? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm really curious to know. The night passed slowly, filled with long hours of pain, fear, and determination. By early morning, the storm outside began to calm, but inside the cabin, the tension only grew stronger. Sarah gripped Jake's hand as another contraction hit, her face tightening with effort. They're getting closer, she said through heavy breaths. Jake checked the time. 5 minutes apart. Sarah, the baby is coming soon. She nodded, her eyes filled with both fear and hope. Just tell me what to do. Jake gathered clean blankets, boiled water, and laid out his medical supplies. His hands were steady and sure. Even after 3 years, the part of him that knew how to save lives came back the moment someone needed him. You're doing great, he said softly. I'll be right here. We'll do this together. A strong contraction came and Sarah pushed with all the strength she had. Minutes felt like hours as Jake guided her through the delivery. At last, a tiny cry filled the cabin. Jake lifted the newborn gently and wrapped her in a warm blanket. It's a girl, he said, his voice thick with emotion. She's breathing well. She's healthy. Sarah sobbed with relief as Jake placed the baby in her arms. The child's small fingers curled around Sarah's thumb. The sound of her soft cries filled the cabin with a new kind of warmth. It didn't feel like a cold mountain cabin anymore. It felt like the start of a new life. She's beautiful, Sarah whispered. My Christmas miracle. Jake watched the mother and child with a heart that felt like it was finally beating again after years of numbness. She really is. Sarah looked up at him with tired, grateful eyes. I want to name her Emma, after your wife. I hope that's not too much to ask. Jake's breath caught. Hearing his wife's name spoken with love instead of sorrow made his chest tighten. But this time, it wasn't pain, it was healing. She would be honored, he said quietly. Thank you. As morning light broke through the window, the storm faded. The sky turned pink and gold, shining over the snowy mountains like a blessing. Sarah rested while Jake checked the baby's breathing and temperature again. The little girl was strong, despite coming early. But just as peace settled over the cabin, Jake heard a sound that made his heart stop. Engines. 2 trucks climbed up the snowy road. Jake's jaw clenched. He moved to the window and saw something he feared. One was an ambulance, but the other was a black SUV. Sarah's face went pale. He found me. Jake turned to her, his voice firm. Listen to me. You and Emma are safe. I won't let anything happen to you. The ambulance stopped outside the cabin, and 2 paramedics stepped out. But from the black SUV, a tall man in a dark coat climbed out, his expression cold and angry. Sarah trembled as he approached the cabin. Jake opened the door before the man could knock. The man shoved forward, but Jake blocked him with his body. "She's my wife," the man snapped, "and that's my child. Move!" Jake stood firm. "She is not your property, and after the way you treated her, you will not go near her or the baby." "You think you can stop me?" the man growled. "I'll take her to court. She has nowhere else to go. No money, no home. She will lose, and that baby will come with me." Sarah heard every word and gathered her baby protectively in her arms. Tears filled her eyes, but she held Emma tightly, refusing to let go. Jake didn't move from the doorway. "You're wrong. She has a place now. She's not alone anymore." The paramedics stepped between them. "Sir, step back. We need to get the mother and child to the hospital. You can follow procedures there." The man glared at Jake one last time. "This isn't over." But for the first time, Jake wasn't afraid. He watched them load Sarah and baby Emma into the ambulance. Sarah didn't look at her ex-husband once. Her eyes stayed on Jake. He leaned in before they closed the doors. "I'll be right behind you. I'm not leaving you." Quote. A few hours later at the hospital, doctors examined Sarah and baby Emma. Both were stable, safe, protected. When Sarah was moved to her room, Jake sat beside her. She held his hand with quiet trust. "I'm scared of what comes next," she said. "You don't have to be," Jake replied. "I have a lawyer who will help you, someone who will make sure he never takes Emma from you." Sarah looked at him with a soft smile. "Why are you helping us so much?" Quote. Jake looked at baby Emma sleeping in the hospital crib, then back at Sarah. "Because I lost my family on Christmas Eve. I thought my life ended that night. But then you showed up at my door. And I realized I was wrong. My life wasn't over. It was waiting for a reason to start again." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "And Emma gave that to you?" "You both did," Jake said. "And now it's my turn to help you live again too." As Christmas night settled over the hospital, Sarah slept peacefully with baby Emma in her arms. Jake sat beside them, watching over the new little family like a guardian who finally found his purpose again. Outside, snow fell gently, not as a threat, but as a quiet gift. A fresh start. Jake whispered, "Merry Christmas, Emma. Welcome to a life where you will always be loved." This time, the truth didn't shatter him. It saved him.